Brett Hudson.
Thank you very much. Rise to speak on the title for this, and I think the point here is not so much or more than just the fact that we've struck out, or the committee recommended that we strike out and work contact hours, but more to the point the significance of why that's come about. In its most obvious sense, it's because the committee recommended that the work contact hours provision that were in Part 1 of the bill originally should be removed. But the real heart and reason for that is because they are no longer required. And that speaks to one simple fact, that a measure that this government's put in place actually provides work contact hours to the same or near the same extent under another piece of legislation which has passed through the House and is now enacted. So the government has undertaken those measures that mean that the provisions already exist under law and therefore there is no need for them. But it speaks to more than that, because what it shows is the government, while this bill and maybe other previous similar pieces of legislation have been in the House in the past, the government has been acting. So the removal of the work contact hours from this particular member's bill, because the government's already done something which means they are no longer required.
Or I am going to require the member to take a seat and remind him that we are now debating the bill as it was passed at the second reading. The words that the member's debating are not part of the title and therefore are not part of the debate.
One page a day. Thank you, Ms Dyson. In that case, sir, instead we'll move on to the commencement dates. The commencement date would see the first tranche of 4 additional weeks on the 1st of April 2017. As my colleague has noted, originally that was going to be the 1st of April 2016, which of course would have been a bit of an impossibility, so it was a very sensible decision and recommendation to move that forward, and then next year the further 4 weeks in 2018. But what they do is bring in expenditure into those specific time periods. And as we've heard through the debate, that the officials gave advice to the committee that the total expense over a 4-year period would be about $466 million additional, and these commencement dates would lock that in. So it would become very clear that through to the term of, I think, fiscal year 2020, that would see an additional cost. So those commencement dates in this bill would commit the government to that sort of expenditure. And the implications of that have been reverberating around the House this evening, sir, where people are very strongly suggesting that the fiscal conditions of today, when we could potentially enact the legislation, simply do not permit for that increased level of expenditure. And while the Treasury may be forecasting some surpluses, some incredibly good ones actually, in the years to come, they are quite some years in advance and further ahead than even the commencement date of Part 2, if this bill were to be enacted. So both commencement elements, both Part 1 for an additional 4 weeks and Part 2 for a further additional 4 weeks, would commit the government to expenditure which do not fit inside or easily fit inside the current fiscal envelope as projected by Treasury over the next couple of financial years, so the period when each of them would come into effect. And that is the heart of the government's position and has been throughout the bill, is that it's not about an additional dollar of paid parental leave, it's about the total cost of a program. And it has been the position that the total cost of 26 weeks is not affordable in what we have today or can see in the immediate term of the commencement of Part A and Part B, and that remains our position. So as we come to the end of, or near the end of the discussion on these preliminary clauses, we would restate that were these clauses to be passed or agreed to by the House in this stage and to progress to a third reading, then they would be effectively seeking to commit the government to expenditure which does not readily fit within the envelope today. It's expenditure which we say we shouldn't be committing to for this purpose now. The government has many responsibilities to meet, and to expend more in this area would require a change in another area of expenditure, and it is our view that what we have mapped out, at least in the budget for the coming 4 years, is a better use of those projected funds. So Mr Chair, the House will make a call shortly, but it is our view.
Question is that clause 1